Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, May 15th, 1946. The war had been over for a year. The flags were down. The victory parades had ended months ago. Most of the prisoners had already gone home, but in barracks, 12 boys sat on metal bunks, waiting. They ranged in age from 14 to 17, too young to shave, old enough to have killed. Colonel William Brennan stood at the door, a folder thick with deportation orders in his hands. He was 35 years old, a career officer from Richmond, Virginia. He had a wife named Margaret, a nurse, a son named Benjamin, 14 years old, the same age as the youngest boy in this room. Brennan cleared his throat. "Gentlemen," he said. The word felt strange. They were children. But they had worn uniforms. They had carried weapons. The army classified them as combatants. "Your transport has been arranged. 2 weeks from today, you'll be processed for repatriation. You're going home." The silence that followed was not relief. It was terror. A boy stood up, 15 years old, thin but tall, with careful eyes that had learned to read men quickly. His name was Friedrich Keller. He had the best English in the group. He had appointed himself their voice. "Sir," Friedrich said. His accent was thick, but his grammar was precise. "We don't want to go." Brennan looked at him, really looked, saw the fear, saw something else too, determination. "Son, the war is over. You get to go home." Friedrich's jaw tightened. "We have no home." 8 months earlier, September 1945, somewhere south of Nuremberg. Friedrich Keller was 14 years old when they captured him. He had been a soldier for 6 months, a Hitler youth conscript. They had given him a uniform that didn't fit and a Panzerfaust he could barely lift. They told him the Americans tortured prisoners, that death was better than surrender, that Germany could still win if boys like him just fought hard enough. He believed them, until he didn't. The Americans found him hiding in a barn. No ammunition, no fight left, just a boy in an oversized coat shaking. The soldier who pulled him out was young, maybe 25. He looked at Friedrich the way you'd look at something broken, something that shouldn't exist. "Jesus Christ," the soldier said. "How old are you?" Friedrich didn't answer. Couldn't. Terror had locked his throat. They zip-tied his wrists, put him in a truck with 11 other boys, all of them conscripts, all of them certain they were driving toward execution. The truck ride lasted 3 days. They were processed at a facility near Frankfurt, photographed, fingerprinted, asked questions they were too afraid to answer honestly. Then they were loaded onto a ship. Friedrich spent the Atlantic crossing in the hold, vomiting, expecting torpedoes, expecting the Americans to dump them overboard halfway across. They didn't. Instead, the ship docked in New York. They were transferred to trains, then trucks. Then impossibly they arrived at a place called Oklahoma. Camp Gruber sat in rolling farmland that looked nothing like Germany. The sky was bigger. The air smelled different. Dust and grass and something else. Something that wasn't smoke or cordite or death. On their first day, Friedrich and the others were lined up in a gravel yard. A man in an American officer's uniform walked the line, older than the combat soldiers, calmer. He stopped in front of each boy, looked them in the face. When he reached Friedrich, he paused. "How old?" he asked. "14," Friedrich whispered, then remembering 14. The officer's face changed, just slightly, something behind his eyes. "Jesus," he said quietly. "You're Benjamin's age." Friedrich didn't know who Benjamin was. The officer, Colonel William Brennan, looked at the other guards. "Get them cleaned up. Hot showers, clean clothes, 3 meals a day. And for God's sake, treat them like kids, not prisoners." Friedrich didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. It wasn't hatred. That was the first shock. The second shock came 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday, October. The Oklahoma sun was still warm, but the mornings had started to cool. Friedrich and the others had been assigned to a mess hall detail. Sweeping, cleaning tables, learning the rhythm of American military efficiency. They ate separately from the regular soldiers. Prison rations, decent food by wartime standards, bread, soup, vegetables, nothing special. Until that Tuesday. Friedrich smelled it first. He was sweeping near the kitchen door when the scent drifted out. Rich, fatty, unmistakable. Grilled meat, real meat, beef. Not the sawdust sausages of the last year of the war, not the thin soups that passed for protein in the Hitler youth camps. Actual beef sizzling on a grill. Friedrich stopped sweeping. The smell was overwhelming. It triggered a hunger so deep it was almost painful. Another boy, Peter Hoffman, 14 years old. The smallest of them grabbed Friedrich's arm. "Was ist das?" Peter whispered. "What is that?" Friedrich didn't answer. Couldn't. He was too busy trying not to cry. The kitchen door swung open. A woman emerged. Not young, maybe 58, with grey streaks in her dark hair and an apron dusted with flour. Her name was Dolores Whitfield. She had worked at Camp Gruber since it opened. Cook, manager, grandmother to half the soldiers who passed through. She looked at the boys and smiled. "Lunchtime," she said. "You all hungry?" They didn't understand the words, but they understood the gesture. She waved them toward a table. What came next changed Friedrich's life. Mrs. Whitfield brought out plates. Real plates, not tin trays. On each plate sat something Friedrich had only seen in propaganda posters mocking American excess. A hamburger, golden brown bun still warm, butter melting into yellow pools on the surface. A beef patty, thick as a man's thumb juice, pooling at the edges. Cheese melted over the top. Pickles, lettuce, tomato. It looked like a photograph, like something that couldn't be real. Friedrich stared at it. So did the others. Mrs. Whitfield set a plate in front of each boy. 12 hamburgers. 12 portions of what looked like paradise. "Go on," she said. Her voice was gentle, southern, warm. "You all eat up now." Peter picked up his burger with shaking hands. He brought it to his mouth, took a bite. The sound he made wasn't quite a sob. It was something deeper. A noise that came from a place of profound deprivation, meeting sudden, overwhelming generosity. Friedrich watched Peter's face crumple, watched tears start to fall, watched the boy try to eat and cry at the same time. Then Friedrich looked down at his own plate. He picked up the hamburger. It was warm, heavy. The bun was soft under his fingers. He could smell the beef, the butter, the sharp tang of pickles. He bit down. The taste was almost violent in its richness. Beef, salt, fat, comfort, everything his body had been screaming for since 1944. Everything Germany had stopped being able to provide by the time they drafted children. Friedrich's vision blurred. Tears fell into the burger. He didn't care. He ate. They all ate. 12 boys crying while eating hamburgers in an Oklahoma mess hall. Mrs. Whitfield stood by the kitchen door watching. Her eyes were wet. One of the boys, through tears, managed a question in broken English. "Warum?" he asked. "Why, you... give this..." Mrs. Whitfield walked over. She put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Child," she said, "you're hungry. My job is to feed hungry souls. Don't matter where you come from. Hungry is hungry." Friedrich looked up at her. This woman, this enemy, who had just given him the best meal of his life. "Thank you," he whispered. The first English words he said with meaning. That night, alone in his bunk, Friedrich wrote in a journal he kept hidden. The entry was in German, shaky handwriting. "They gave us what they eat. Not scraps. Real food. The same food their soldiers get. Everything I was taught was a lie. America doesn't torture enemies. They feed them. I don't understand. But I know this. I never want to leave." He thought of his younger brother, Klaus, dead at 12 in the bombing of Berlin. Klaus, who would have cried over a hamburger. Klaus, who never got a second chance. Friedrich decided something that night. If somehow, impossibly, he could stay in this place that fed hungry boys instead of shooting them, he would find a way. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened in small moments. Accumulated days. The slow, careful thawing of boys who had been taught to expect cruelty and instead found something else. October became November. November became December. The boys were enrolled in a school program, 3 hours a day. English, mathematics, American history. Friedrich absorbed it all. He had always been smart. Top of his class before the war, turned education into propaganda. Now he devoured real learning again. The history lessons shocked him most. The American teacher, a veteran too old for combat, taught about slavery, about the Civil War, about American mistakes and failures. Friedrich raised his hand one day. "You teach the bad things," he asked, struggling with English tense. "You teach America's wrongs." The teacher looked at him. "Son, if we don't teach our mistakes, we'll repeat them. Truth matters, even when it's ugly." Friedrich had never heard a teacher say that. In the Hitler Youth questioning was treason. History was whatever the Reich said it was. Here, truth was complicated, messy, real. It made him trust them more, not less. By December, Friedrich could hold conversations. He read American newspapers. He learned about baseball, though he'd never played. He discovered that Americans argued about everything freely without fear. It was intoxicating. The work program started in January 1946. On weekends, boys were sent to local farms, supervised labor, learning agriculture, earning small wages. Friedrich was assigned to the Garrison farm. Frank Garrison was 52, a farmer, weathered skin and quiet eyes. He had lost a son at Normandy. Thomas, 19 years old, dead on a beach in France fighting Germans. Friedrich didn't know this when he arrived. He just knew Mr. Garrison looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. The Garrison farm was 200 acres of wheat and cattle. Frank's daughter Evelyn, 17, helped run it. She was tall, practical with her father's quiet competence. She taught Friedrich to drive the tractor. "Clutch first," she said, guiding his hands. "Then gear, feel it." Friedrich felt it, the rumble of the engine, the power, the simple mechanics of a machine doing what it was built to do. He was good with machinery. It made sense in a way people didn't. By February, he was repairing equipment, fixing a seized carburetor, rewiring a starter. Frank Garrison watched him work one afternoon. "You're good with your hands," Frank said. Friedrich looked up grease on his fingers. "I like to fix things," he said. His English had improved. "In Germany, I wanted to be engineer. Before." Frank nodded slowly. "My son Thomas wanted that too. Engineering. He was good at math. Smart kid." A pause. "You remind me of him." Friedrich froze. He had learned by now what Gold Star families were, what it meant when there was a folded flag in the front room. "I'm sorry," Friedrich said quietly. "About your son." Frank looked at him for a long moment. "You didn't kill him," he said finally. "Old men killed him. Old men in Berlin and Washington who decided boys should die for their decisions." He paused. "You were a kid. Thomas was a kid. Both of you got handed rifles and told where to point them." Something in Friedrich's chest loosened. "Thank you," he said. Frank nodded. "Come on, let's get this tractor running before dinner. Evelyn's making pot roast." That became the pattern. Work, meals, learning. Slowly, carefully, Friedrich began to imagine a future that wasn't marching or dying. He began to imagine staying. Friday nights became sacred. Mrs. Whitfield started a tradition. Every Friday she cooked fried chicken for the boys, her grandmother's recipe. Buttermilk brine, seasoned flour, deep fried until the skin crackled like paper. The boys gathered in the mess hall, 12 of them, week after week. They ate together, talked, practiced English, slowly became something like friends instead of fellow prisoners. Friedrich often helped Mrs. Whitfield in the kitchen, peeling potatoes, washing dishes, learning. She told him stories while they worked, about her husband, Charles, a soldier in the Great War. Killed at Belleau Wood in 1918. "War makes orphans," she said one evening, hands deep in dishwater. "Makes widows, makes ghosts out of boys who should have grown old. But it also shows us what matters. Kindness, feeding people, taking care of each other when everything else is broken." Friedrich listened. "You miss him?" he asked. "Every day," she said. "But missing doesn't mean stopping. He would have wanted me to feed hungry boys, so that's what I do." She looked at Friedrich. "You're a good kid," she said. "Don't let the war tell you different. You're going to be just fine." Friedrich nodded, but he didn't tell her what he was thinking. That in 2 months he'd be deported, sent back to a Germany that didn't exist anymore, to a family that was dead, to a future that was rubble. He didn't want to go. None of them did. The letter arrived in April. It was addressed to Peter Hoffman, the youngest boy, 14 years old, sweet-faced. Trusting in a way, war hadn't completely destroyed yet. The Red Cross had been working to locate families, to reconnect prisoners with whoever was left. Most letters came back empty, families dead, addresses bombed into craters, whole bloodlines erased. Peter's letter came from a neighbor, not family. Friedrich was there when Peter opened it. They were in the barracks. Evening. The Oklahoma sun turning the windows gold. Peter's hands shook as he unfolded the paper. He read silently. His face went white. Friedrich waited. Peter looked up. "Mutter ist tot," he whispered. "Mother is dead." Friedrich moved closer, gently took the letter. It was in German. Careful handwriting from someone who knew how to deliver bad news. "Your mother died in the bombing of February 1945. Your father is missing, presumed dead. The house was destroyed. I am sorry to tell you this, Peter. There is nothing left here for you. If you can stay in America, stay. There is no future here." Friedrich read it twice, then handed it back. Peter didn't cry. He just sat. staring at nothing. That night, Friedrich found him outside, sitting on the steps of the barracks, staring at the Oklahoma sky. Friedrich sat beside him. "I have nothing," Peter said quietly. "No house, no parents, no brothers or sisters, nothing." Friedrich nodded. He knew that feeling. His own family was gone. Mother dead in the bombing, father and brothers missing. Probably dead. "You have Oklahoma," Friedrich said. Peter looked at him. "What?" "You have Oklahoma, Mrs. Whitfield, the Garrisons, Colonel Brennan, Mr. Calloway who teaches math. You have people who care if you live or die. That's not nothing." Peter was quiet. "I want to stay," he whispered. "Is that wrong? To want to stay in the country that defeated us?" Friedrich thought about it. "No," he said. "It's not wrong. Germany gave us guns. America gave us hamburgers. Germany gave us death. America gave us school. I want to stay too." Peter turned to him. "Can we—" "I don't know," Friedrich admitted, "but we can ask." They held the meeting in secret. All 12 boys. Barracks 7. Late at night, when the guards had rotated. Friedrich stood at the center. "We counted," he said, speaking German so everyone understood perfectly. "9 of us are confirmed orphans. 2 don't know if family is alive. 1 has a distant aunt." He looked around the room. "In 2 weeks they're sending us back. Back to nothing. Back to cities that don't exist. To families that are dead." Silence. "I think we should ask to stay." A murmur. Uncertain. Hopeful. Scared. "They'll say no," one boy said. "The Americans have rules." "Maybe," Friedrich agreed. "But maybe they'll say yes. Colonel Brennan has a son our age. Mrs. Whitfield lost her husband in the last war. Mr. Garrison lost his son in this one. They understand loss. They might understand us." Peter spoke up. "I want to stay. I'll sign anything. Do anything. I don't want to go back to graves and rubble." One by one the others nodded, except one. Hans Meyer, 16. He had received a letter too. His mother was alive, remarried, living in a town that had been spared the worst of the bombing. "I have to go back," Hans said quietly. "My mother is waiting." Friedrich nodded. "We understand. This is for the ones who have nothing left." 11 boys agreed. Friedrich spent 3 days writing the petition. He labored over every word. His English was good, but not perfect. He wanted this to be flawless. The final version was simple. "We are orphans of war. We have no families. We have no homes. Germany gave us weapons and told us to die. America gave us education and told us to live. We request permission to remain in the United States and in time to become citizens. We will work. We will study. We will serve. Please do not send us back to graves." All 11 boys signed. Friedrich took the petition to Colonel Brennan's office on a Thursday morning. Brennan was at his desk. Paperwork. The endless bureaucracy of running a detention facility winding down after war. "Sir," Friedrich said. "May I speak with you?" Brennan looked up, gestured to a chair. Friedrich sat, placed the petition on the desk. "Please read," he said. Brennan picked it up, read slowly. His face changed as he went, something tightening around his eyes. When he finished, he set the paper down carefully. "Friedrich," he said, "I understand what you're asking. I do. But the law is clear. Prisoners of war must be repatriated. There are no exceptions, not even for minors." "We are orphans," Friedrich said, his voice steady. "We are not prisoners returning to homes. We are orphans being sent to graveyards." Brennan was quiet. "I have a son," he said finally. "Benjamin. He's 14. Your age. Peter's age." He looked at Friedrich. "If the war had gone differently, he could be you. I understand that. But understanding doesn't change the law." Friedrich nodded. Expected this, but he had to try. "Will you submit it?" he asked. "To whoever decides these things, let them say no. But let us ask." Brennan looked at the petition again. 11 signatures. 11 boys who wanted to stay in the country that had defeated them. He thought of Benjamin. Safe at home, going to school, playing baseball, growing up. These boys wanted the same thing. "I'll submit it," Brennan said. "I can't promise anything, but I'll send it to the War Department. Let them make the decision." "Thank you, sir," Friedrich said. That night, Brennan called his wife, Margaret. "They want to stay," he told her. 11 orphan boys.
They don't want to go back to Germany. Margaret was quiet on the line. What did you tell them? That the law says no, but I'm submitting their petition anyway. Good, Margaret said.
You're a good man, William. I don't know if good men follow orders that send children back to nothing. Then maybe good men bend the rules when the rules are wrong. Brennan didn't answer, but he thought about it. The War Department's response came 6 days later. Denied, repatriation mandatory, no exceptions, regardless of age or circumstance. Brennan read it twice. Then he walked to the barracks. He found Friedrich, told him. Friedrich's face didn't change. He had expected this too. "Thank you for trying, sir," he said. Brennan left, but he didn't throw away the petition. He kept it in his desk drawer, just in case. Margaret Brennan wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. She was a nurse. Practical, stubborn in the way nurses had to be to get things done in army bureaucracy. She had spent the war patching up soldiers, arguing with doctors, and navigating impossible situations with competence and quiet fury. When William told her about the denied petition, she made a decision. "I'm going into town," she said. "Margaret." "Don't," she said. "Those boys have no one. Someone needs to fight for them." She started on a Saturday morning. Muskogee, population 3,200, small enough that everyone knew everyone, big enough to have opinions. Margaret went door to door. Her pitch was simple. There are 11 orphan boys at Camp Gruber, German prisoners of war. Children, really. The youngest is 14. They want to stay in America because they have nothing to go back to. No families, no homes. The army says no, but I'm asking you, should we send children back to nothing, or should we give them a chance? The responses varied. Some people said yes immediately. Farmers who had employed the boys on weekends. Teachers who had taught them in the camp school program. Women with sons who saw the boys as children, first enemies second. Others said no. Veterans who had lost friends. Families who couldn't separate the boys from the regime that had killed their loved ones. But Margaret was relentless. She collected signatures. A petition of her own. Addressed to the War Department, the State Department, anyone who might listen. Within a week she had 200 names. By the end of the second week, 400. But there was resistance. The loudest opposition came from Virgil Radcliffe. Virgil was 77 years old, a Gold Star father. His son Daniel had died at Anzio in 1944, age 20, infantry, killed by German artillery. Virgil stood up at a town meeting. Margaret had organized it to gather more support. "You're asking us to forgive the enemy," Virgil said. His voice shook with age and anger. "My son died fighting these people. Now you want to reward them, give them American homes, American futures." The room went quiet. Margaret stood. "Mr. Radcliffe," she said, "I understand your pain. I do. But these boys didn't kill Daniel. They were children when Daniel died. Some of them were 12 years old. They didn't choose war. They were handed rifles and told where to aim." "They're still Germans," Virgil said. "They're orphans," Margaret countered. "Would you send an orphan back to a graveyard?" Virgil's jaw tightened. He sat down, but he didn't sign. Margaret knew she needed to change his mind. If a Gold Star father could forgive, others would follow. She went to Mrs. Whitfield. "Can you arrange a meeting?" Margaret asked. "Mr. Radcliffe and the boys. Private. Let him see them as people, not symbols." Mrs. Whitfield nodded. "I'll make it happen." 3 days later, Virgil Radcliffe walked into the Camp Gruber mess hall. The boys were there, working. Friedrich was repairing a broken chair. Peter was washing dishes. The others were scattered around the room doing chores. Mrs. Whitfield had set it up perfectly. No formal meeting, just work. Just normal boys doing normal things. Virgil stood in the doorway, watching. Peter noticed him first, looked up, saw the Gold Star pin on Virgil's lapel. Peter knew what that meant. He set down the dish, walked over. "Sir," Peter said in careful English, "you lost son in war." Virgil nodded, stiff, guarded. "I am sorry," Peter said. His voice was small, sincere. "My brother died too. He was 12. I did not want war. Your son did not want war. But old men made us fight." Virgil looked at this boy, 14 years old. Daniel's age when he had left for the war. He saw Daniel's face in Peter's. The same youth. The same innocence that war tried and failed to destroy completely. "What's your name, son?" Virgil asked. "Peter Hoffman." "How old are you?" 14. Virgil was quiet. Then, "My Daniel was 18 when he enlisted, 20 when he died, but he was 14 once. Looked a lot like you." Peter nodded. Friedrich approached, introduced himself. We did not choose to be enemies, Friedrich said. We only choose now. We choose to stay, to become American, to be better than the men who made us soldiers. Virgil looked at them, really looked. These weren't monsters. They were boys, thin, scarred in ways that didn't show, trying to survive. The next day, Virgil Radcliffe walked into Margaret Brennan's campaign office. He signed the petition. For Daniel, he said. He wouldn't want more boys to die in ruins. Within 3 days, 200 more signatures appeared. The final count, 847. Margaret Brennan presented it to her husband. Give this to whoever needs to see it, she said. William Brennan looked at the stack of pages. Names, addresses, a town saying these boys deserve a chance. He submitted it with the formal repatriation appeal. The response was the same. Denied. But something had changed. The boys had a town behind them now, and that mattered more than they knew. The denial from Washington arrived on thick government letterhead. Official stamps. Bureaucratic finality. Margaret Brennan read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer with the petition that 847 people had signed. She wasn't finished. We need a lawyer, she told her husband that evening. William looked up from his desk. He had aged in the past month. The weight of watching children face deportation to nothing had carved new lines in his face. Margaret, we tried. The law can be argued, she interrupted. We need someone who knows how to argue it. His name was Thaddeus Calloway, 38 years old, Boston-born, Harvard Law, a man who had spent the first part of the war in the Pacific and the second part trying to forget what he'd seen at Iwo Jima. He had returned to Oklahoma to practice quiet law in a quiet town. Wills, property disputes, the occasional divorce, nothing that required him to think too hard about young men dying. Margaret found him in his office on a Wednesday afternoon. Mr. Calloway, she said, I need you to take a case. He looked up from paperwork, saw a determined woman in her 30s with the posture of someone who had spent years giving orders in hospital wards. What kind of case? 11 boys, German prisoners of war, orphans. They want to stay in America. The War Department says no. Calloway set down his pen. Mrs. Brennan immigration law is federal. It's ironclad. POWs get repatriated. There's no wiggle room. There has to be. There isn't. Margaret didn't move. Mr. Calloway, you have a daughter. What's her name? He hesitated. Rebecca. She's 9. If she was orphaned in a foreign country, would you want her sent back to rubble, or would you want someone to fight for her? Calloway was quiet. Margaret placed the petition on his desk. 847 signatures. This town wants to give these boys a chance. I'm asking you to find a legal way to make it happen. Calloway picked up the petition, read the names, saw veterans, teachers, even a Gold Star father. He thought of Rebecca, safe at home, learning multiplication tables, playing with dolls. I'll look at it, he said. No promises. That's all I'm asking. Thaddeus Calloway spent 3 days in the law library. He read immigration statutes, repatriation protocols, precedents going back to the Civil War. He found nothing helpful. The law was clear. Prisoners of war, regardless of age, must be returned to their country of origin when hostilities ceased. But on the 4th day, buried in an obscure legal commentary, he found something. A footnote. The repatriation statute assumed prisoners had homes to return to. It assumed functional governments, families, infrastructure. What if they didn't? What if orphaned minors with no living guardians constituted a separate legal category? It was a stretch, a massive stretch. But it was something. He drafted a motion. Humanitarian exception for orphaned enemy minors. Argued that sending children to confirmed destruction violated the spirit of international law, if not the letter. On June 15, 1946, he filed it with the Immigration Board. The next day, the Muskogee Phoenix ran the story. By week's end, it had been picked up by the Associated Press. The response was immediate and divided. Letters poured into newspapers across the country. Some said, "These are children. Mercy is American." Others said they're still Germans. Rules exist for a reason. But the story had caught fire. 11 orphan boys fighting to stay in the country that defeated them. It was human. It was complicated. It was impossible to ignore. Early July. The Oklahoma heat had settled in, thick and oppressive. Friedrich was working at the Garrison farm, repairing fence posts with Evelyn. The work was mindless. Good for thinking. He had stopped hoping. The petition was filed. The hearing was scheduled for late July, but Friedrich had learned not to expect miracles. Then Peter collapsed. One moment Peter was carrying a bucket of water across the yard. The next, he was on the ground, convulsing. Friedrich dropped his tools and ran. Peter, the younger boy, was burning up. Fever. His breathing was shallow, laboured. When he coughed, there was blood. Friedrich screamed for help. They brought Dr. Marcus Reynolds from town. He examined Peter in the camp infirmary, listened to his lungs, saw the blood, knew immediately. "Tuberculosis," he said. Margaret Brennan, who had been assisting, went pale. "How bad?" "Advanced. He's had it for months, probably. Malnutrition weakened him. It's in his lungs. Maybe spreading." "Can he travel?" Reynolds looked at her. "Absolutely not. He needs 6 months minimum of treatment. Rest, nutrition, medical supervision. If you put him on a ship now, he'll die before he reaches Germany." Margaret looked at her husband.
William understood immediately. "Then he can't be deported."
"None of them can," Margaret said.
"They've all been in close contact. Quarantine protocol." Reynolds caught on. "Medically, I'd have to recommend holding all 12 boys pending TB screening and treatment. Standard procedure." William nodded slowly. "How long?" 6 months, maybe more." It wasn't a solution, but it was time. William filed the medical hold that afternoon. The War Department protested, but couldn't override a doctor's orders. Public health trumped deportation schedules. The boys stayed, and Peter fought for his life. The treatment was brutal. Peter spent weeks in the infirmary. Bed rest, medication, meals brought to him on trays. Margaret Brennan took over his care. She was a nurse. She knew TB. She knew the risks. Every day she checked his temperature, changed his sheets, made sure he ate. Friedrich visited every evening after work. He sat beside Peter's bed and read aloud. First in German, then in English as Peter grew stronger. Books from the camp library. Mark Twain, Jack London. Stories of American frontiers and adventure. Peter listened. Sometimes he slept. Sometimes he cried quietly, thinking of his mother who had died of similar disease. "You're not going to die," Friedrich told him one night. "Mrs. Brennan won't let you." Peter's laugh was weak but real. "She's scary when she's determined." "That's why we'll win," Friedrich said. "She's on our side." Mrs. Whitfield brought special food, broths made from her grandmother's recipes, rich with fat and protein. "My mama always said," Mrs. Whitfield told Peter, "chicken soup cures what medicine can't." Peter sipped it slowly. It tasted like care. The other boys made him cards, drew pictures, wrote messages in broken English. "Get well soon. We need you. Don't leave us." Friedrich watched it all and understood something fundamental. These Americans were risking TB exposure to save an enemy child, not because they had to, because they chose to. That was the difference. That was what Germany had never taught him. Kindness was a choice, and these people kept choosing it. July 28, 1946, Oklahoma City, Federal Courthouse, 3rd floor, Immigration Board hearing room. The space was smaller than Friedrich had imagined. No grand courtroom, just a conference room with a long table and American flags in the corner. On one side, Thaddeus Calloway and his assistants, 11 boys in their best clothes donated by Muskogee families, William and Margaret Brennan, Benjamin their son, Mrs. Whitfield in a Sunday dress, Frank Garrison and his daughter Evelyn, Virgil Radcliffe leaning on a cane. On the other side, 2 attorneys from the War Department, stern men in dark suits, an FBI observer, a stenographer. At the head of the table, 3 immigration judges. The hearing began at 9 in the morning. Calloway presented his argument. Humanitarian exception. Orphaned minors, no homes to return to. International precedent for protecting displaced children. The War Department attorneys countered. Law is law. Repatriation is mandatory. National security concerns. Former Hitler youth indoctrination. Opening floodgates to thousands of asylum claims. Then came testimony. Friedrich was called first. He stood, walked to the witness chair, placed his hand on a Bible and swore to tell the truth. His English had improved, but his accent was still thick. He spoke slowly, carefully. "My name is Friedrich Keller. I am 15 years old. I was born in Berlin. My mother died in bombing in 1945. My father is missing. My 2 brothers are dead. I have no home to return to." The lead judge, an older man with grey hair and tired eyes, leaned forward. "Mr. Keller, you were a member of the Hitler Youth. You fought for Germany. Why should America allow you to stay?" Friedrich had prepared for this, but preparing and answering were different things. "I was taught to hate," he said.
In Germany, they taught us Americans were evil, that you would torture us, kill us. When I was captured, I believed this." He paused. "Then I met Colonel Brennan. He has a son my age. He looked at me and saw a child. Not an enemy, a child. Mrs. Whitfield gave me hamburger, same food Americans eat, not scraps, real food. She cried when we cried eating it." His voice cracked slightly. "In Germany, I learned hate. In Oklahoma, I learned hope. My brother Klaus died at 12. He never got second chance. You cannot bring Klaus back. But you can give me future. Please, let me stay." The room was silent. The judge made a note. "Thank you, Mr. Keller." Benjamin Brennan was next. 14 years old. Nervous, but determined. He had asked his father to let him testify. "My name is Benjamin Brennan. I'm 14. Friedrich is my age. If I was born in Berlin instead of Richmond, I would be him. He didn't choose where he was born. He didn't choose the war. He just wants what I have. A home, school, a future." He looked at the judges. "My dad always says America is about second chances. Friedrich deserves one. Simple. Direct. From a child to adults making decisions about children." Mrs. Whitfield testified next. She told them about Friday chicken dinners, about boys who said grace in English now, about teaching them to cook, about the way they thanked her every single week for food that Americans took for granted. "These boys are learning to be American," she said. "Not because they have to, because they want to. Don't send them back to graves." Virgil Radcliffe was the last witness for the defense. He walked slowly to the chair, gold star pin on his lapel. "My name is Virgil Radcliffe. My son Daniel died at Anzio, age 20, killed by German artillery." He paused. "Let that sink in. That sink. I hated Germans for a long time. Still do some of them. But these boys..." He gestured to the 11. "They're not the men who killed my son. They're victims too. Different uniforms, same tragedy." His voice grew stronger. "Daniel wouldn't want more boys to die in rubble. He'd want them to have what he had. A home, love, a chance. I'm signing for these boys because my son would have." When he finished, there were tears in the gallery. The War Department attorneys cross-examined, hammered on security risks, precedent, the impossibility of making exceptions. But the emotional weight had shifted. The judges deliberated for 2 hours. Everyone waited in the hallway. Friedrich sat with his back against the wall, Peter beside him, still weak from TB. "What do you think?" Peter whispered. "I don't know," Friedrich admitted. At 4 in the afternoon they were called back in. The lead judge spoke. "This board has carefully considered all testimony and legal arguments. We acknowledge the compelling humanitarian circumstances. However, the law governing repatriation of prisoners of war is unambiguous. Congress has not provided exception for orphaned minors. We cannot create law where none exists." Friedrich felt his stomach drop. "The petition is denied. Repatriation will proceed once medical clearance is granted. We are sorry, but the law is the law." The gavel fell. In the hallway afterward, people cried. Margaret Brennan held Mrs. Whitfield. Evelyn Garrison squeezed Friedrich's hand. Calloway looked shattered. "I'm sorry," he told the boys. "I tried." "We know," Friedrich said. "Thank you for trying." But the fight wasn't over. It was about to get more complicated. The investigation started quietly. A routine audit of Camp Gruber's repatriation paperwork. Standard procedure as the facility prepared to close. What they found wasn't standard. 4 sets of deportation orders had been filed late, delayed by weeks. The boys in question: Friedrich Keller, Peter Hoffman, 2 others. All 4 delays traced back to Colonel William Brennan's office. The investigator's report was damning. Deliberate obstruction, using medical holds as pretext, intentionally slowing bureaucratic process to buy time for legal challenges. On August 5, 1946, William Brennan was summoned to a court-martial hearing. The charges were serious: dereliction of duty, insubordination, obstruction of lawful military orders. Brennan sat at the defendant's table in his dress uniform, facing a panel of 3 officers, all higher rank, all career military. The prosecutor laid out the case, showed the delayed paperwork, the pattern, the clear intent. Colonel Brennan deliberately sabotaged repatriation protocols. He placed his personal feelings above military regulations. This is unacceptable conduct for an officer. The defense attorney asked Brennan to explain. Brennan stood. "I delayed paperwork for 4 boys, all orphans, all facing deportation to confirmed destruction. I did this to give them time. Time for legal appeals. Time for someone to find a solution. Did you believe you had authority to do this? No, sir. Did you know it was against regulations? Yes, sir. Why did you do it? Brennan looked at the panel. Because I have a son, 14 years old, same age as these boys, and I couldn't send children back to graves without trying everything possible to stop it. The prosecutor pounced. So you chose emotion over duty. I chose humanity over bureaucracy, Brennan said, and I'd do it again. The room went silent. Then the doors burst open. Virgil Radcliffe walked in. Behind him, 20 veterans, all wearing their service medals. The presiding officer stood. This is a closed hearing. We're testifying, Radcliffe said. Character witnesses. That's allowed, isn't it? The officer hesitated. Technically, yes. One by one, the veterans spoke. They talked about Brennan's service, his leadership, his integrity. They talked about what it meant to be a good officer, following orders, yes, but also knowing when orders conflicted with what was right. This man saw children who needed help, one veteran said. He helped them. That's not a crime. That's humanity. The prosecutor tried to argue, but the moral weight was overwhelming. The verdict came 3 hours later. Guilty of procedural violations, demotion, colonel to major, formal reprimand, permanent record, but no discharge, no loss of pension, minimal consequences. As Brennan left the hearing, Radcliffe clapped him on the shoulder. Worth it? The old man asked. Brennan thought of Friedrich, Peter, the others. Every bit. But the repatriation order still stood. August 20th, 1946. New transport date, August 25th. 5 days. The camp moved into preparation mode, processing, paperwork, final medical clearances. Peter had recovered enough to travel. The doctors cleared him. No more excuses. The boys packed their few possessions, clothes donated by Muskogee families, books, letters, a photograph. That photograph had been taken on the last Friday dinner in August. Mrs. Whitfield had cooked an enormous meal, fried chicken, biscuits, gravy, corn, everything the boys loved. All 12 of them gathered, plus the Brennans, Mrs. Whitfield, the Garrisons, Calloway, Radcliffe. They ate together, told stories, laughed more than seemed possible given what was coming. At the end, someone suggested a photograph. They arranged themselves, boys in front, adults standing behind, Mrs. Whitfield in the center with her arm around Peter. The photographer, a local newspaperman, set up his camera. Everyone ready, smile. The flash popped. That photograph captured something, not just faces, but a moment. A community that had tried to save children and failed, but had tried. Friedrich kept his copy in his shirt pocket. The night before departure, Calloway met with Brennan privately. I found something, Calloway said. A legal technicality. If their paperwork went missing during transport, it could delay reprocessing for months. Maybe long enough for the political climate to change. Brennan looked at him. You're suggesting we lose their paperwork on purpose? I'm saying accidents happen. Brennan shook his head. No, I bent the rules. I delayed, but I won't break the law. We've done everything legal we can do. So you're giving up. I'm accepting reality. Sometimes you fight and lose. Doesn't mean the fight wasn't worth it. Calloway left disappointed. Brennan sat alone in his office and thought about Benjamin, about what he'd tell his son when the boys were gone. He'd tell him the truth, that they tried, that trying mattered even when it failed. August 25th, 1946. Dawn came orange and gold across the Oklahoma plains. The trucks were already waiting at the loading dock. 11 boys. One had already left days earlier, Hans Meyer, to reunite with his mother. These 11 had no one. Families gathered outside the fence, not allowed closer. Military protocol. Margaret Brennan stood with Benjamin. Mrs. Whitfield leaned on Frank Garrison. Evelyn was crying openly. Calloway stood apart, looking defeated. The boys climbed onto the trucks one by one. Friedrich was last. He paused at the tailgate, looked back at Margaret. She pressed her hand against the chain-link fence. He pressed his hand against the other side, as close to touching as regulations allowed. Thank you, he said, for everything. I'm sorry we couldn't do more, she whispered. You did everything. The guard called him. Friedrich climbed into the truck. Peter sat beside him, face pressed against the canvas side, looking out at Mrs. Whitfield. The engines started. Then someone shouted, "Wait!" A car screeched into the lot. Calloway jumped out, waving papers.
Stop the trucks! The convoy halted. Calloway ran to the gate guard, showed him documents. Federal court order. Emergency stay. They can't leave. The guard read it, called his superior. There was confusion. Radio calls. More officers arriving. 10 minutes of chaos. Then the tailgates dropped. Everybody out. The boys climbed down, confused, scared to hope. Calloway was breathless. Judge issued a 30-day stay, pending re-examination under new displaced persons category being considered by Congress. You're not going. Not today. Friedrich's knees buckled. Peter collapsed against him, sobbing. Around them, families rushed the fence, pressed against it, reaching through. Margaret was crying. Benjamin was shouting. Mrs. Whitfield had her hands over her mouth. The boys stood on Oklahoma dirt, free for 30 more days. But as Calloway walked away, he looked at Brennan, and something passed between them. This wasn't over. The real story was just beginning.
The 30 days felt like borrowed time. August 25th through September 25th, 1946. A month suspended between hope and inevitability. The boys remained at Camp Gruber under status review pending congressional action. Bureaucratic language for waiting, for praying that men in Washington would decide children mattered more than precedent. They attended Muskogee High, real school. Friedrich studied mathematics and English literature. Peter worked through algebra, catching up from years lost to war. Weekends they lived with sponsor families. Friedrich stayed with the Brennans, his own room, clean sheets, a window overlooking Oklahoma plains that stretched forever. Benjamin treated him like the brother he'd never had. They fixed an old radio together, played catch, talked about the future in the careful way boys do when they're pretending tomorrow is guaranteed. For 30 days, Friedrich allowed himself to hope. Then, September 25th arrived. A telegram came to Calloway's office. Petition denied. Stop. Congressional committee declines. Special consideration. Stop. Repatriation order. Reinstated. Stop. Transport. Scheduled October 10th. Stop. Final decision. Stop. No further appeals. Stop. Calloway read it aloud. The boys sat silent. Hans Meyer had already gone home. Early September. Reunited with his mother, the only one with family waiting. These 11 had nothing. I'm sorry, Calloway said. His voice was rough. There's nothing left to try. Friedrich nodded. He had expected this. October 10th, 2 weeks away. Final. October 9th, 1946, the night before departure. Mrs. Whitfield's kitchen had never worked so hard. She started cooking at dawn. Fried chicken, dozens of pieces. Her grandmother's buttermilk brine, seasoned flour, deep-fried until the skin crackled like paper. Biscuits, gravy, corn, mashed potatoes, 3 peach cobblers. This was the last Friday dinner, the real one. No more stays, no more miracles. By evening, the mess hall was packed. 11 boys. The families who had fought for them. Brennan and Margaret, Benjamin, Mrs. Whitfield, Frank Garrison and Evelyn, Virgil Radcliffe leaning on his cane, Calloway, townspeople who had signed the petition, people who had become family. They ate slowly, trying to make time stretch. Friedrich sat between Benjamin and Evelyn. He barely tasted the food, just watched the faces around him. American voices, American laughter, the sound of home. After dinner, people began their goodbyes. Virgil Radcliffe moved down the line of boys, shook each hand firmly. Be good men, he said. Wherever you end up, honorable, kind, that's what we fought for. We will try, sir, Friedrich promised. Mrs. Whitfield hugged each boy, hard, like she was trying to press courage into their bones. You write to me, she told Peter, every month. Yes, Ma'am, Peter whispered. Both knew he probably wouldn't be able to. Frank Garrison pulled Friedrich aside. You would have made a fine engineer, he said quietly. Friedrich couldn't speak, just shook the man's hand. Evelyn didn't say anything, just hugged him tight. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. Before people left, someone suggested a photograph. They arranged themselves quickly. Boys in front, adults behind, Mrs. Whitfield in the center with her arm around Peter. The flash popped. Friedrich tucked his copy into his shirt pocket, right over his heart. That night, Brennan found Friedrich sitting alone outside the barracks. The Oklahoma sky was full of stars. Brennan sat down beside him. I failed you, son. Friedrich shook his head. You gave me school, family. You gave me America. Even if it ends tomorrow, you gave it to me. No one can take that away. Brennan's voice was thick. I wish that was enough. They sat in silence until the stars wheeled overhead, and Friedrich finally went inside to pack. October 10th, 1946. Dawn. The trucks waited at the loading dock. Engines running, guards checking manifests. 11 boys climbed aboard. No hands. He was already in Germany, already home. These 11 had no home waiting. The families stood outside the fence. Military protocol kept them back. Margaret pressed her hand against the chain link. Benjamin stood beside her, crying openly. Mrs. Whitfield leaned on the garrisons. Evelyn's face was buried in her father's shoulder. The convoy pulled out at 0800 hours. Friedrich pressed his face against the canvas, watched Oklahoma disappear behind dust. No last-minute miracles this time. The route was predetermined. Camp Gruber to Tulsa, rail transfer to Kansas City, Chicago, New York, then ships to Europe. 5 days of transport. The train rolled through Kansas that night, stopped at a rail yard outside Kansas City for refueling. 2 a.m., October 11th. The guards were tired. End of a long war. Everyone just wanted to go home. A railroad supervisor approached with coffee and sandwiches.
Courtesy of the company, he said. The guards took them gratefully. Within 20 minutes, exhaustion and warm food put them into light sleep. While they dozed, the rear cargo door opened from outside. Thaddeus Calloway stood in the darkness. Behind him, 5 cars, engines off, lights dark. He climbed into the rail car, found 5 boys who had been told to expect him. "Now," he whispered. "Quickly, no sound." Friedrich, Peter, Werner Schultz, Otto Fischer, Klaus Becker. They grabbed their small packs, followed Calloway into the night. 5 cars, 5 drivers. Frank Garrison took Friedrich, covered him with a tarp in the truck bed, piled hay on top. William Brennan took Peter. Same method. The others went to farmers from different counties. The cars dispersed on back roads. No headlights until they were miles away. By dawn, the boys were hidden across Oklahoma. The guards woke at 6, did morning count, 5 missing. The investigation was immediate. FBI.
Interviews with every guard, every railroad worker. No one had seen anything. Official conclusion: escaped during night. Whereabouts unknown. Likely fled south to Mexico. Case remained open. But the trail was cold. 6 boys continued to New York. Eventually to Germany. 5 became ghosts. Friedrich's world became a barn loft. Frank Garrison had prepared it. Insulated walls, a wood stove, a cot, books, a small desk. During the day, Friedrich hid, read, studied correspondence courses in mathematics and engineering that Frank brought him. At night he worked. Fixed farm equipment, always after dark, always out of sight. His cover story was simple. Frank Jr., orphaned cousin from Tennessee. That's what neighbors were told about the extra help. Most didn't ask. Rural Oklahoma minded its own business. Evelyn was his teacher. She brought newspapers, books, helped him eliminate his accent. "You need to sound American," she said. "Generic American. No one can place you." Friedrich practiced obsessively, listened to radio announcers, mimicked their neutral tones. By 1948, his German accent was nearly gone. The FBI came 3 times. Each visit, Frank played the irritated farmer. Let them search. They found nothing. Friedrich hid in a crawl space beneath the barn floor, learned to stay motionless for hours. After 1950, they stopped coming. The others lived similarly. Peter in the Brennan basement, Werner, Otto, Klaus, scattered across 3 counties. Different families, different covers. They communicated through coded letters. Mrs. Whitfield served as their secret mailbox. She knew everything, said nothing. Once a month they gathered at the Garrison farm. Friday nights, Mrs. Whitfield cooked fried chicken by lamplight in the barn loft. 5 boys eating in secret, keeping each other sane. "What if they find us?" Peter asked once. "Then we tried," Friedrich said. "Better than dying in rubble." 6 years in shadow. Friedrich went from 15 to 21, boy to man, hidden. The risks were constant. Peter nearly discovered in 1948 when an FBI agent showed up unannounced. A sponsor's death in 1951 made them fear exposure. Korean War brought renewed scrutiny, but Oklahoma kept its secrets. Then the law changed. 1952. The Displaced Persons Act expanded. Now it included anyone who could prove loss of family inability to return safely, American sponsorship, and clean record. Calloway saw the opening immediately. Emergency meeting, all 5 boys, all sponsors, Mrs. Whitfield. "This is the legal path," Calloway said, "but it requires lying about the gap years." The story would be simple. 5 displaced persons recently escaped from Soviet-controlled East Germany. Years spent in Austrian refugee camps. Records lost in post-war chaos. The years 1946 to 1952 would become displacement. No documentation. Everything burned or lost. Every sponsor agreed to commit perjury if necessary.
The applications went in March 1952. Friedrich's interview was in Dallas. May. He walked in with Frank Garrison. The immigration officer was processing hundreds of cases, professional, tired. "Mr. Keller, where were you from 1946 to 1952? Friedrich had practiced this answer for weeks. "Refugee camps, sir. Austria mostly. Sometime in West Germany. Records were lost in a fire. I have documentation from the Red Cross confirming my status." Calloway had obtained a genuine letter through careful networking. "And Mr. Garrison sponsors you?" "Yes, sir. I've been working his farm since early 1952. He's willing to support my citizenship application." The officer looked at Friedrich for a long moment. Friedrich held his gaze, steady, calm. "You speak English remarkably well for a recent arrival." "I studied in the camps, sir. American language programs. I wanted to be prepared." The officer made notes, stamped forms. "Approved pending background check. Welcome to America, Mr. Keller." All 5 applications were approved between May and August 1952. After 6 years of hiding, they were legal. The irony was profound. Friedrich had been in America since 1945, 7 years. Now he was officially arriving for the first time, but he was home, finally legally, undeniably home. Life began. Friedrich moved out of the barn, rented a room in town, worked at a machine shop. Enrolled at University of Oklahoma for 1953. Peter went to community college, engineering. Werner became a teacher. Otto a mechanic. Klaus studied business. All 5 stayed in Oklahoma, near the families who had risked everything. In 1957 they became citizens, stood before a judge, raised their right hands, swore allegiance to the United States of America. Friedrich meant every word. He married Evelyn Garrison in 1958. They'd loved each other since he was 15. Now they could admit it publicly. Their son was born in 1962, Benjamin William Keller, named after both Brennans. Friedrich never hid his German origins, but he never explained the gap years. When asked, he said simply, "I came after the war. Refugee program. Oklahoma took me in." True enough. August 25th, 1971, 25 years since the day they were supposed to leave. The reunion had been planned for months. Muskogee Community Center, Friday evening. All 5 men came. Friedrich 40, Peter 39, Werner, Otto, Klaus. They brought wives, 17 children between them, all American, all growing up in Oklahoma. The families gathered. William Brennan, 60, retired major, grey but solid. Margaret beside him. Benjamin, 39, with his own family. Mrs. Whitfield, 83, frail but determined. She had cooked fried chicken. Same recipe. Her hands remembered even if they moved slower. Frank Garrison, 77, Evelyn holding his arm. Virgil Radcliffe, wheelchair-bound at 102 but sharp-eyed and present. Thaddeus Calloway, 63. Quieter now but smiling. The room filled with laughter, embraces, tears of joy. On the wall, 2 photographs side by side. The 1st August 1946. 12 boys gathered around Mrs. Whitfield's table, young, scared, uncertain. The 2nd taken that evening. 5 men, confident, American, surrounded by wives and children. The transformation was visible, undeniable. Friedrich stood to speak. The room quieted. 25 years ago, he began, his voice steady, we were supposed to leave America. 11 of us refused to accept that. He gestured to the people gathered. For 6 years, good people broke rules to keep us safe. Major Brennan sacrificed his rank. Mr. Garrison risked prison. Mrs. Whitfield lied to federal agents. Mr. Calloway could have been disbarred. His voice grew stronger. They did this because they saw children, not enemies. They saw us as somebody's sons. He pulled out the photograph from 1946, the one from that last dinner. Faded now, creased, but carefully preserved. My brother Klaus died at 12. He never got a second chance. He never tasted Mrs. Whitfield's fried chicken, never learned what freedom felt like. He looked at Mrs. Whitfield, tears in his eyes. You fed us when we were hungry. You gave us hope when we had none. To Brennan, you protected us when the law said abandon us. To the Garrisons, you hid us when discovery meant prison. To everyone, you made us Americans, not with paperwork, with love. The applause was thunderous. People were crying openly. Mrs. Whitfield's fried chicken was served. Same recipe. 25 years later. The taste of memory. The taste of home. Peter closed his eyes as he took the first bite. Still tastes like freedom, he said softly. The children played. American kids who existed because Oklahoma had chosen mercy over rules. Friedrich's son, Benjamin William, played with the Brennan grandchildren.
They were the age Klaus would have been if he'd lived.
Friedrich watched them and understood that this was the victory. Not just survival, legacy. As the evening wound down, the 5 men stood together one last time. "We made it," Peter said. "We're home," Werner added. Friedrich looked at his friends, his brothers, the boys who had refused to leave, and the men they'd become. "We kept our promise," he said. "We became Americans worthy of the sacrifice." They raised glasses. A toast. "To Oklahoma, to second chances, to the people who chose kindness over law." "To home," they said together, 30 years later. August 2001. Major William Brennan died peacefully, age 90. The funeral drew hundreds, full military honors, flag-draped coffin. 5 old men sat in the front row. Friedrich 70, Peter 69, Werner, Otto, Klaus, all still in Oklahoma. Friedrich gave the eulogy. "This man saw enemy children and chose to see only children. He lost his rank protecting us, never regretted it." His voice was steady despite tears. "He couldn't change the law, so he bent it. And good Americans helped us disappear. We lived 6 years in hiding. We've lived 55 years in freedom." After the burial, 5 elderly men stood at the grave with fried chicken, Mrs. Whitfield's recipe. Peter's wife had learned it before the old woman died. They placed it on the headstone. "Thank you, Major," Friedrich said quietly. "For everything." They saluted, hands shaking with age. But the gesture was sharp, respectful, final. The last survivor was Friedrich Keller. He died in 2019, age 88, surrounded by children and grandchildren. His funeral drew hundreds, generations of family, students he'd taught, people whose lives he'd touched. They buried him with an American flag and the photograph from 1946. His descendants still gather every August 25. They make fried chicken, tell the story. Remember, 47 children, 89 grandchildren. Hundreds of descendants now, all American, all alive because Oklahoma chose kindness. The official records still show 5 boys who escaped in 1952. The gap years remain mysterious. But the legacy is clear. Citizenship isn't about where you're born. It's about who claims you as their own and who you choose to become. 11 boys refused to leave America. 5 disappeared into Oklahoma's heart. And decades later on Friday nights across the state, families still make fried chicken and tell the story of the boys who became Americans not through paperwork but through love.